each pillar, and he's completely helpless and completely hopeless and completely powerless, and he's in the presence of all of his enemies, and he doesn't have any friends with him and any family with him, and no one's coming to help him, and the situation is grim. So, how did our boy Samson get here? What happened, what transpired to lead to this horrible situation? See, I like in movies and in TV shows when they start the episode or start the movie with a scene from the end of the movie. And it kind of intrigues you, and it kind of has this mystique to it, and it draws you in. So you see something at the very end, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You see it at the beginning, and you're like, wait, what happens? How does that happen? How do we get there? And so you're immediately interested. There's a lot of movies I could name that do this. There's a lot of TV shows that do this, but I love this tactic. Because here's what I love about it. If I'm just watching a movie, start to finish, it usually takes me a while to get interested in it, or I'm kind of skeptical where like, am I into these characters? Am I into this story? Is this actually interesting? And then like it kind of takes you a while, and you're like, is this going to have a payoff? Is it going to have a good ending? I don't know. You kind of have some skepticism. However, if they show you this kind of intriguing, interesting scene from the end of the movie at the beginning, they immediately have your interest because you're like, whoa, 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 I got to find out how we get there. And so I'm locked into the script automatically and immediately. And so I'm watching and I'm like, okay, I got to figure out as I'm reading this, like, how does he get there? How does everything unfold? I want to try to figure it out before we actually get there. And so that's what we want to do in this series. We want to give you, like I just did, this picture of Samson between these two pillars at the end of his life. And we want to ask the question, how did he get here? What's the backstory? What are the events that transpired to lead up to this? And so we're going to get into that, especially today, but we're going to get into that next week too. And we're going to look at the life of Samson and what we can learn and what we can glean and what exactly happened to lead to this dramatic and tragic last scene. And in our lesson tonight, as we look at these events that transpired to lead up to this, here's what I want to suggest to you. Here's kind of our bottom line. Here's our takeaway. And here's what I want you guys to hold on to. And then we're going to kind of visualize this with the story. Here's the point. The choices you make you. All right, I'm going to say that again. The choices you make you. Now, I'll elaborate on that a little bit, but simply what I mean by this, what I intend by this is that the choices you make every single day, the thousands of little choices you make, are making you the person that you're going to be. The person you're becoming is the person you will become. Things don't happen by accident. You don't just wake up one day and just, oh, I'm this way. Oh, okay, weird. No, there's a lot of decisions that were made, a lot of choices that were made along the way that led to that made you who you are. So we're going to explore that in the story. And so as we get into the story of Samson, one of the things you guys probably know by this point, who've been coming here for a while, is I never like to just drop you in the middle of a passage. Because here's the problem. I grew up, and I heard a lot of Bible stories, and I was like, I don't know where that junk is. Like, I don't know where in the, front, back, where's it at? I don't know. And so when you know the actual storyline of the Bible, things start to make more sense. So lightning quick, super fast, I just want to give you kind of the background of the story of Samson so you know where in the Bible we're at and how things fall. And then I'll kind of give you the reference we're going to be in. So I've talked to you several times, we're going to breeze through it, about the children of Israel. And there's this group of people God called and chose to be his people. And through this nation, he was going to bless all peoples, all families, all nations of the earth. Because that's God's plan, is to bless all people and nations of the earth, to restore his good creation. And he's going to do that through this people. And we learn that in Genesis, but then we get to Exodus and we're like, oh snap. They're in slavery, in captivity in Egypt. So they cry out to God, and God hears their cry because he always hears the cry of his people. Pay attention to that. And so he sends this guy Moses to bring him out of their slavery in Egypt, and he's going to lead them into the promised land. And we talked about this a couple different times. They're in the wilderness. They get to the edge of the promised land. They're going to go in. They chicken out. They wander in the wilderness. Then the second generation arises. They get to the edge of the promised land. They're getting ready to go in. And Moses says, hold up. I got a couple rules, got a couple instructions, got a couple warnings for you guys before you go in there. And he gives them this book in your Bible called Deuteronomy. And he goes, hold up, before you go into the promised land, I need you to know a couple things. He gives them an extensive list of extensive warnings. But here's what you need to know for the purposes of the sermon tonight. In Deuteronomy 7, Moses says, when you get into the land, do not, so pay attention to this rule because you're going to see it a lot in the sermon today. When you go into the land, do not marry into the different tribes and people groups there. Now, when Moses says this, it's not about their ethnicity or their race. It's about their religion and the gods they worship and the way they worship those gods. So Moses doesn't want the children of Israel to intermingle with these people groups in this land they're entering into called Canaan, because he's like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get married to them, and you're going to start worshiping the same false gods that they do. And those false gods are not the one true living God that saved you from Egypt. And the way they worship those gods is really appalling and inhumane and horrible. So don't do it, okay? So pay attention to that rule. They're not supposed to marry people from these tribes. So they end up going into the promised land. They have a new leader. His name's Joshua. He's killing it in the game, and they're doing really well. And they end up conquering this land. Everything seems to be going smoothly. And even Joshua issues a warning to the people once he conquers the land. He says, hey, remember what Moses said? Don't marry from these different tribes and these different people groups. Now, there's a whole list of people groups, but one of these people groups will be known as the Philistines. And we've talked about them before. And so he's warning them, okay, don't marry with these people groups, okay? We good? Okay. So that's Joshua's command. He kind of backs up Moses. Well, then Israel enters into this time of prosperity. When they're in the promised land, it seems like things are going well. Everything's amazing, except that it's not, because some stuff goes down. And Israel, time and again, turns away from God. And they go into this period that biblical theologians called the cycle of judges, where they keep making the same mistake again and again and again. And just in case you think that sounds ridiculous, I mean, that's my life for real. Like just making the same mistakes again and again and again. And this is what Israel does. And so what happens is, there's this phraseology, there's these recurring phrases in Judges. And they always start like this. They say, in those days, there was no king in Israel, because at this time they didn't have a king. And it says, everyone did what was, now pay attention to this, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So there's no king, everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. But then you come to find out that what is right in their own eyes, what the people of Israel thought, oh, that's a good idea. What was right in their own eyes was actually evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Israelites were doing stuff they were not supposed to do, and they thought it was okay. Like, yeah, do what you want. Do what feels good. Sure, worship other gods, whatever. And because of this, it would rouse God's anger, and God would punish them by sending one of these indigenous people groups, one of these tribes, to conquer them. And then in their desperation, they would cry out to God, God, please save us like you did in Egypt. And then God, because he's merciful and kind, despite their constant failure, would send a judge to come to Israel, or to be raised up from Israel, and to deliver the people from the hand of their enemy. Now, when we hear judge, we think of someone in like a long black gown with a little gavel, or maybe you think of like my girl, Judge Judy, my childhood crush. Don't laugh at that. I like strong women, okay? So, what kid liked Judge Judy? I don't know. I had the hots for her when I was younger. So, you might think of that. Not a judge in that way. Judge more as in like a governor or like a military leader. So, this cycle gets repeated again and again, and wash, rinse, repeat in the Old Testament. Israel does what's right in their own eyes, but what's actually evil in the eyes of the Lord. And they worship other gods, and this makes God angry. And so he punishes them, and they get conquered by a people group. Then they call out to God, hey, remember when you saved us in Egypt? Could you do that again? Then God in his kindness raises up a leader to liberate them. And this happens again and again and again and again. And it goes on through 13 different judges in the book of Judges, which leads us to our passage today, Judges 13. So if you got your Bible with you, turn to Judges 13. Now, we're going to be less line by line this week because we're covering 3 chapters of text. You don't want me to read whole chapters of text. That would take forever. So I'm going to give you kind of the highlights, but we're going to read some parts of the text. So open up to Judges 13. So I told you kind of the setting, this cycle of judges. Now I've got to introduce to you Samson's mama. And Samson's mama, we're not giving her name, but we are given the occasion and the circumstances that she's living in. So if you guys have your Bibles open to Judges 13, it says in Judges 13:1, and the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Again, the cycle of Judges persists, and the Philistines are ruling over the Israelites. Well, in this time, the Lord appears to this woman, Samson's mama. We don't know what her name is, so we'll just call her Samson's mama. And the Lord appears to her and says, hey, you're going to have a child. And this child will, pay attention, begin to deliver the people of Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Because remember, God would always raise up a judge to help deliver the people. He's like, hey, this kid's going to help deliver the people from the hands of the Philistines. But he gives these stipulations. He gives some rules for this kid she's raising. And he tells her to raise her son as a Nazirite. Now, quickly, a show of hands. Who knows what a Nazirite is? That's what I thought. Okay, so a Nazirite was someone this is a reference to something in the book of Numbers, which is back in the Old Testament. And basically what a Nazirite was someone who decided they were going to take this vow to show how committed they were to the Lord. And they were actually going to change their appearance and act a certain way and do certain things and not do certain things so that they might honor the Lord. And so as people would look at a Nazirite, they could tell, oh, that guy or that girl is a Nazirite. And even by their actions, they're like, oh, I can tell that guy or that girl, they're a Nazirite. And so it was just, being a Nazirite was this deep inward commitment to the Lord, and you demonstrated that by your external appearance. So I'll give you an analogy. Like, I got a wedding ring, okay? This wedding ring is a symbol and demonstration of a deep internal commitment that I have to my wife. And it not only honors my wife, but like it puts other people on notice, right? Okay? No, I'm just kidding. That's not necessary. I'm funny looking. So basically, a Nazirite, you could tell by looking at them what a Nazirite was. Now, let me give you a quick description because this will factor into our story today. A Nazirite could not eat grapes. Don't ask me why. I don't know. They couldn't drink alcohol. They would have to have long hair and never cut it. I'm going to say that again. They would have long hair and they couldn't ever cut it. And they weren't allowed to touch any dead bodies. Which you might hear that and be like, okay, I'm all set. Because you're not going to be like, oh, man, I was wanting to mess with some dead bodies. No. But this is a very Jewish thing. You're not supposed to touch dead bodies because it's considered unclean. So this is what a Nazirite was supposed to do, okay? No grapes, no wine, long hair, no dead bodies. We're all set. And so the angel tells, or the messenger of God, as he's appearing to Samson's mama, says, hey, this kid's going to be a Nazirite, okay? So raise him like one. And so that's what we need to know about Samson's background. She gives birth to little baby Samson, and he grows up, and it says that the Spirit of the Lord begins to stir in him. Now, here's something you might not know about the story of Samson, something you might find interesting. Every Sunday school story I ever heard, or every picture I ever Googled of Samson, you see this dude that's got like that CrossFit, jacked look to him, right? Like some CrossFit mutant, and dude's just swole, right? Well, the text never actually says that. There's ways in the Bible that they could say that. In fact, in Hebrew, you could say a guy is an ish gadol, a great man. That's how Goliath is described. Or you could say he's head and shoulders taller than everyone. That's how King Saul is described. Or they might give like some funky dimensions, like he's got a chest that's 4 goats wide. You know what I'm saying? Like the Bible's got some weird measurements like that. Dude's got a chest that's 4 goats wide. Don't mess with that dude. And he's got a big head. You don't get in a fight with a guy with a big head. And so we don't get any descriptions. Honestly, Samson was probably just like a regular looking guy. But when the Spirit of the Lord, when the presence of the Lord came upon him, that's when he was empowered and strengthened. And we'll see that in the story. So we got our backstory. We got where we're at in the Bible. We know what's going on in the land of Israel. We got a little bit about like Samson's birth and who he's supposed to be and the purpose he's supposed to live into. So what I want to do now is take you through 4 events in the life of Samson. And from each event, we're going to learn a little something about ourselves. And we're overall collectively going to learn each time we get to one of these events that the choices you make you. The choices you make you. First situation, turn to Judges 14, and then you're going to be on verse 1. Samson does not seem like the best guy in the whole world. Here we go. Samson went down to Timnah. I'll explain. And at Timnah, he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Remember who the Philistines are? We just talked about it. He came up and he told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife. This guy didn't even ask, please. Rude. So then it says, but his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among your own people that you must go take a wife from the Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. So, a couple things here. So, Samson lives in this place called Zorah, which is in the land of Israel, in the promised land. What you don't know about Zorah, but what I'm here to tell you and help you with is Zorah is what's called a border town. And it's right at the border of Israel and the land of the Philistines. So by analogy, in the U.S., in Texas, there's this place called El Paso, or there's another place called like Texarkana, and they're called border towns because they're at the border of the United States and Mexico, all right? It's a border town. That's where Samson lives. He lives on a border town. And so he goes to this place called Timnah. And so he goes down to Timnah, and he's hanging out there in Timnah, which is in the land of the Philistines. I guess that's not bad, but he's going there. He's going somewhere he probably shouldn't, to look for something he probably shouldn't want with someone he probably shouldn't be with. And he's looking for a Philistine girl. And he says that he wants her. Now, in this context, and he tells his parents to go get her for me. And in this context, that means he wants to marry her. Now, flashback, and this is why I explained this to you. It wasn't just superfluous information. Before the children of Israel go into the promised land, Moses warns them not to intermarry with the different tribes, right? So Samson is not obeying the word of the Lord because Samson's like, yeah, I know what Moses says, but I'm just going to marry this woman from the Philistines. Cool, okay. So he's disregarding that. What's more, look at the way he talks to his parents. He's like, I want her. Get her for me. And then when his parents try to warn him, like, we don't know if this is a good idea. Can you find someone among your own people? He's like, I said I want her. Go get her for me because she's right in my eyes. Okay? What did we talk about at the beginning? In this time, in the book of Judges, Israel did what was right in their own eyes because they were foolish and they did not listen to the word of the Lord. Samson is repeating that same cycle. She is right in my eyes. So, here's something I want to point out, and here's something we need to take away from this section of the story. Samson is a very demanding, selfish, and disobedient person. He's completely disregarding the law of Moses, where Moses warned him, warned the people before they entered the land. He's volitionally and intentionally ignoring the advice of his parents. Whoa, why don't you marry someone from here so you don't worship false gods? Completely ignores it, and all he says is, I want, get for me, I'm going to have it, I'm taking her as my wife. Demanding and selfish. And so here's what we learn from that. The choices you make you. And if you make the choice to be a demanding and selfish person, well, guess what? 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you're going to be a demanding and selfish person. It doesn't just happen. This persists over time. So every day, you make choices about how you're going to live in the world, how you're going to treat other people, how you're going to follow Jesus. And so you might just think like, well, I want to do what I want. Or if you make decisions where you're like, well, I just kind of want I want to do me and what makes me happy. I don't really care about what other people are doing. Wait, I'm supposed to be thinking about other people? If you do that and you practice that and that seems right in your eyes, the choices you make you. And you will eventually become a selfish and demanding person. And this is not God's good plan and purpose for your life. Because God's plan and purpose for your life is to look more like Jesus every day. To be more like him. Not to be a selfish and demanding person. Now let me flip the script, being on the other side of that. If you're in a relationship with someone, if they are a selfish and demanding person, and you see that over time, and they keep making choices to kind of do what they want to do, or be demanding, or they're like, or you start to feel like, well, they never really listen to me or ask what I want, or like they don't really seem to care what anyone else has to say, or I'll tell them not to do something or warn them, and they never listen. Well, guess what? They're probably going to stay that way unless God moves in a dramatic way in their life, and they decide to surrender that to the Lord. And I know people that have been married for years, and they're like, yeah, I'm married to a very selfish, demanding person. And it's like, well, let's just look back at the history and the track record. Demanding and selfish, demanding and selfish, demanding and selfish, much like Samson. It doesn't just happen. It persists over time. It develops over time. The choices you make you. So that's the first thing we see, and that's the first thing we want to avoid. We don't want to be demanding and selfish like Samson is here. Well, here's the second thing. Samson decides, okay, so I'm gonna go down to Timnah, and I'm gonna tell this girl basically that I want to marry her. And then he's on his way back home, back to the land of Israel, and he's confronted by a lion. And so this lion starts running at him. And instead of freaking out, it says that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him and it strengthens him. Now, remember what I told you earlier. In a lot of Sunday school drawings, Samson's like some swolled, CrossFit mutant. No, he's probably just a normal-looking guy. But when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, this is the first instance we see him demonstrate this power. And it says that he's able to tear the lion to pieces with his bare hands. That's impressive. So he tears the lion apart with his bare hands, and he moves on. Then he and his parents take another trip back to this place called Timnah, and they start arranging the marriage, and so Samson's like, this girl is right in my eyes, and he's like, I'm going to marry her. Well, then Samson is on his way back home to see his parents, and he sees again the carcass of this lion he killed. So he's kind of like, ooh, gross. He has to step over it. But he notices that the carcass is split open, and he notices that there's like bees inside of it, and that they've made like a honeycomb. And so, like any of us would do, Samson thinks, a snack. And so he reaches in there, and he grabs the honeycomb, and he starts eating honey from the honeycomb. This is a weird thing. This is a very weird thing. So then he goes home. Now, there's something wrong with this, but we'll get to that. He goes home, and he offers some to his parents. You know, this is really good. You guys want some? They take some. This is delicious. This is delectable. Now, let's remember back. Samson was called to be a Nazirite. And there's lots of rules for being a Nazirite. One of those rules, besides the grapes, the wine, the hair, was you're not supposed to touch a dead body. Samson knew this. It didn't matter if it was a human body, animal body, whatever. He ignores this as well. Completely disregards his calling, God's purpose on his life, disobeys, and he touches this dead body, and he gets this honeycomb, and then he gives some to his parents. Now, being Jewish, they were not supposed to touch any dead bodies because it was also considered religiously unclean. And also, let's be honest, kind of gross. So the text goes out of its way to say that he doesn't tell them where he got the honey from. And so he just gives it to him, and I don't know what happened. Maybe they were like, where'd you get it from? And he had to probably lie, got it from the, what was the question? Where did I get it from? Which, by the way, if you ask someone a question and they repeat the question, it means they're lying. Okay, that one's free. So where did I get it from? Oh, the honey store, it's on B Street. Like he's got to just make up lies. Now, here's what we learn from this. Here's what we learn from Samson here. Samson is lying, and he's manipulating his parents. Now, there's bold-faced lies, but there's also lies of omission, where you're just like, well, I'm just not going to tell them, and I won't try to manipulate them. And so Samson starts this really subtle act of lying here. Well, I can just tell you, throughout the rest of the story, he lies again and again and again, and he just keeps lying to people, because that's how it works. So what I want us to take away from here is the choices you make you. And Samson makes the choice to start lying and start manipulating. And just like Samson, if we make that choice and we start just telling even just like little teeny tiny lies or like really subtle versions of truth, then that starts to change you. And you start to just kind of get in the habit of that. And 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, guess what? You're someone who lies. You're someone who manipulates people. And this is not a good thing. And maybe that's right in your own eyes, but hey, that's not a good thing. The choices you make you, and you don't want to develop a track record of this. Because here's the thing. It's not part of God's goodwill, plan, and purpose for your life. Because God's goodwill and purpose and plan for your life is to look more like Jesus, not to be lying and manipulating people. And I can tell you, too, as someone who's older than you guys, it is beneficial for you guys to hear this now, to set up good habits now. Because let me tell you this, this should hit close to home. If you develop habits of lying now, or even just kind of bending the truth a little bit, that's going to cost you your job someday. If you go to a job and you get caught in a lie, even if it's a small lie, you can get fired over that junk. If you go to college and you just are like, well, I'm not it's not technically cheating. If your teacher thinks it's cheating, you're manipulating, you're kind of lying about something, guess what? You can get expelled. In your marriage, you don't want to drag that junk into your marriage. You don't want to drag lying or kind of just omitting the truth or being manipulative into your marriage. Because, and again, put yourself on the other side of this. If you're in a relationship with someone and you already detect that, yeah, they kind of lie to me sometimes. They're like, they don't really, he didn't tell me about that, or she didn't tell me about that. That's weird that they wouldn't tell me about that. Or maybe you feel like, well, I feel like they kind of manipulate me sometimes. Well, guess what? That's just going to keep being the case unless there's a dramatic movement of God, an act of God in their life, and they surrender that part of their life to God. So I don't want it to seem hopeless or like, yeah, you're absolutely going to become this person. But I'm saying, barring an act of God or opening yourself up and surrender to God, that's who you will become. The choices you make you. So that's the second thing we see in Samson. So here's the third thing we see, okay? We're looking at 4 episodes. Third thing we see from Samson. So he ends up He's in love with this woman from Timnah. He ends up marrying her. Now, at their wedding, this is a 7-day feast. For those of you who like to know cultural things like this, in this part of the world and in this culture, weddings last for not 1, not 2, not 3, but 7 days. It's a party. And so everyone comes in and they party for 7 days. What's more, you usually have a group of companions or groomsmen, if you're the guy, to help you get stuff together. Now, normally in Samson's case, his boys, his companions, would be from his own people group. However, because he's marrying a Philistine woman, which he's not supposed to, just a reminder, because he married a Philistine woman, he's got a group of Philistine companions or groomsmen, okay? Now, this part of the story gets really weird. He makes a bet with these guys because he wants to mess with them. Now, ladies, let me just talk to you for a minute. On your wedding day, week, if you decide to go a week, more power to you, okay? It's going to be a big bill to foot, though, so just be careful. If your guy is worrying about playing pranks or messing with people on your wedding day, that's a problem, okay? Because it's about you during that time, okay? So ladies, just hear me say that, okay? So Samson is trying to pull pranks on these guys, and he enters into a bet with them. And he goes, I got a riddle for you guys. Here's the thing, though. If you can't solve my riddle, you have to give me 30 linen garments and 30 pairs of clothes. Now, you might be thinking, like, that's really random. Okay, there's 30 guys that he's making this bet with. And all those guys are wearing clothes with linen garments, or maybe I should say undergarments underneath. So if you know the culture, you know basically Samson is gambling, hey, if you don't get my riddle, you have to give me your clothes, and they'll be naked and embarrass themselves at this wedding. So he makes this weird bet with them. This dude is at his wedding. Like, pay attention to your wife. What are you doing? So he makes this bet with them. And it says for 3 days of the wedding feast, because the wedding feast lasts for how long? How long? 7 days. Take that idea, run with it, okay? Just again, good luck with the bill. And so for 3 days, they can't figure it out. So finally, they ding, ding, ding on Samson's wife's shoulder. Again, we're not giving her name. And they're like, hey, can we talk to you for just 1 second? Come here. They're like, you better tell us what that riddle means. Because if you don't, we'll kill you. Yikes. Like, that's like this prank just like went south fast. And like, if you don't tell us, we're going to kill you. And you only have till the 7th day of the feast to do it. So you better ask your husband what the answer is. So she begins to ask Samson, and she asks him, and she asks him, and she begs him, and he won't tell her the answer to this riddle. So finally, on the 7th day, which is the last day of the wedding feast, she starts crying. And it says that she presses him, or she pressures him. It's actually this Hebrew word, tsuk. And tsuk means to pressure, to coerce, and to try to put pressure on to get what you want. And so she does that. The reason I tell you this is because this is going to come up later in the story too. Samson's going to fall for the same thing twice. So she pressures him, and Samson goes, okay, I'll tell you. Tells her, she tells the guys that are in the bet, they come to Samson and are like, hey, we got the answer. They give it to him, and Samson is furious because he knows that they got the answer from his wife. So this is crazy. This is straight psychotic sociopath behavior. Samson, in a rage, leaves, goes to this place kind of like way far away in this obscure location called Ashkelon, and it's in the land of the Philistines, and he kills 30 Philistines. He murders 30 Philistines because, again, Samson didn't think he would lose this bet. And so Samson didn't have 30 pairs of clothes. He just had 1 pair of clothes and undergarments. He wagered the 30 because he's like, well, I'm going to win. Well, when he didn't, and what he does, instead of having a concession, he goes and he murders 30 Philistines, comes back, drops the 30 piles of clothes, and he's like, I'm out. And it says that he left in hot anger and leaves his wife and goes back to his father's house in the land of Israel. So ladies, if you're tracking, he not only was trying to pull this elaborate prank on the wedding week, but then he leaves his wife on the last day of the wedding, and she has no idea where he goes. After murdering 30 people of her people, he leaves and just storms off. This is messed up. So this is the third thing we learn from Samson. Don't bet and don't murder. No, I'm just kidding. That's not it. Don't murder 30 Philistines. Take that, write it down, use it. No, don't murder. We see with Samson, we see this anger and this violence start to emerge. this anger and this violence start to merge. And here's the thing. Here's where it applies to us. Here's where it applies to us. The choices you make you. The choices you make you. And so if you are a person who makes the decision to give in to your anger, to just let your anger right out, or maybe it's not physical violence, but you just use violent words, and you like to yell at people, and you like to call people out, and you like to belittle people, and you like to cuss people out, or like maybe you're screaming at people. Well, if you're that kind of person, and that is what's right in your own eyes, the choices you make you. And guess what? 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you're going to be an angry and violent person. And that is not God's plan or purpose for your life. Because his plan and purpose for your life is to look more like Jesus, not an angry, violent person. And again, flip the script, if you're on the other side of this and you're in a relationship with someone and you're starting to see like, oh, geez, they just flew right out the handle. That was really scary. Or you're in a relationship with someone and it's like, oh, this person like grabbed my wrist a certain way or hit me or whatever else. Guess what? That stuff is probably unchecked, is probably not going to change. Because anger and violence, again, the choices you make, if you're making those choices, that's going to be who you become. And I've talked to so many people throughout my years of ministry. They're like, yeah, I always saw this like really, really red hot, white hot temper that they have, but I just kind of thought it would go away. Now, barring an act of God and a powerful movement of God in their life, it probably is not going to, unless they surrender that area of their life. So my caution to you is be careful with your anger. Be careful with your violence. Be careful next time you want to scream at someone or throw a punch at someone or just deal in anger rather than kindness. So that's the third thing we learned from Samson. So finally, we got to get to the end of Samson's story. And what we're going to do, too, is next week we're going to retract the story, and we're going to look at this contest and this exchange of violence between Samson and the Philistines that goes throughout the story. We're going to look at that next week. So Samson actually goes into this long period after he kills 30 Philistines of just going to war, just wilding out with the Philistines. But we're going to get to that next week. So after this whole war with the Philistines, he ends up in this place called the Valley of Sorek. And the Valley of Sorek is really close. It's another kind of border town. And it's not that far away from where he lives. And he goes there because he's in love with this woman named Delilah. This is probably the part of the story you're familiar with. And so he's in love with Delilah, and he is in a place he shouldn't be, okay? Looking to do stuff he probably shouldn't be doing as he is entering into this kind of physical relationship with Delilah and with a person he should not be doing it with, Delilah. And so the rulers of the town, the Philistines, are like, Delilah, come here. Now tell me if this seems familiar. They're like, ding, ding, ding. Hey, hey, we're going to need you to tell us the source of Samson's strength, okay? What we need you to do is figure out, we need you to seduce him. It says in the text, seduce him. We need you to seduce him real fast and find out how we can tie him up, bind him, and take him away, okay? And Delilah's like, okay. And they even offer to bribe her and pay her. Well, Delilah is not familiar with the art of subtlety, okay? So she hears these instructions and she goes, okay, hey, Samson. And she's like, can you go ahead and tell me the source of your strength so I can tie you up and have you taken away? What is wrong with this picture? This is not subtle at all. Like she could have been like, hey, just out of curiosity, what's the source of your strength? I'm just curious. I just want to get to know you more, baby. No, she's just like, hey, how can I tie you up and take you away so they kill you? And so Samson, he actually is okay with this. By analogy, let's just go, fellas, if someone came up to you and a woman was like, hey, do you mind telling me your bank account information so I can hack your bank account and steal your identity? You'd be like, no. But Samson, for some reason, is dumb and is just like, okay, I'm okay with this. She's super hot. And so they enter into this relationship, and from here, there's this cycle. The book of Judges is all about these bad cycles. And Delilah, 3 times, is like, hey, big boy, what's the source of your strength? And 3 times, Samson's like, and he makes something up, and he lies to her because the choices you make you. And so he's a liar, and so he's here lying. And so he lies to her several times. And she keeps seducing him, he keeps lying. So finally, she's like, you're breaking my heart. And so finally, it says that she presses him. She pressures him. And it's the same cycle, the same thing we saw with his wife earlier. And in fact, the same word is used in Hebrew. It says that she pressures him or really presses into him to tell her. And so finally, Samson tells her the source of his strength. And she's totally going to exploit that. So he falls asleep, and here's what he told her. He says, hey, if you cut my hair off, then I will lose my strength. Now, again, Samson was supposed to hold to the vows of a Nazarite. No grapes, no alcohol, long hair, don't cut it, and also no touching dead animals. We know he's already violated that one, but now he's getting ready to have his hair removed. And so she lulls him to sleep. She cuts off his hair, and then for the fourth time she goes, "Hey, Samson, wake up, the Philistines are here." And Samson wakes up, and it says that the Spirit of the Lord departed from him, and he was weak and helpless. And so the Philistines bind him in bronze shackles. And for those of you who like, again, historical stuff like this or some deeper stuff like this is really interesting that they put bronze shackles on him because the Philistines had iron. And not everyone in the world at that point had iron, and iron was stronger than bronze. So if you're trying to bind someone super strong, you'd put them in iron so they can't get out. They just put him in bronze because they're like, he's weak now. And then they gouge out his eyes and they shave his head. So what can we learn from our boy Samson here? Okay, well, first of all, you don't want to be the kind of person that keeps repeating the same mistakes again and again. This exact same situation happened earlier, and he was pressured and pressed, and he gave in. And then later on, he's pressured and pressed, and he gives in. You don't want to be the kind of person that again and again in your life makes the same tragic mistake, and especially if it comes to someone pressuring you to compromise. The choices you make you. And if you're the kind of person that is always giving in to pressure, and that always gives into the expectations of others, or when someone, and you keep repeating the same mistakes. If you start that now, well, guess what? When you're 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to be the kind of person that keeps repeating their same mistakes again and again, and you're going to be the kind of person that never stands for anything because you always give in to pressure. And this is not God's good plan and purpose for your life, because his plan and purpose for your life is for you to look more like Jesus and not like someone who continually gives in to other things or repeats the same mistakes again and again, willfully and volitionally against God. And so there's a lot to learn from Samson, unfortunately. And again, put yourself on the other side of this in a relationship. If you're in a relationship with someone who's constantly pressuring you to do something that is not biblically right, not God's good plan and purpose for your life, and they're constantly pressuring you, guess what? They're always going to be that person that's going to keep pressuring you. It's not just going to magically go away unless there's a mighty act of God in their life and they surrender that aspect of their life to God. Or, don't be the person pressuring someone like that. And so we see Samson at the end of his life. He's brought to this place called Gaza, which is kind of in the heartland of the land of the Philistines. And just like at the beginning of the story, his wrists are shackled. His eyes are gouged out. His head is shaved. He's got one hand on two pillars that are part of this giant building. And he's surrounded by his enemies. And he's helpless and hopeless and powerless and humiliated. And he doesn't have any friends around or any family around. And there's no help coming. And it's a tragic situation. And we can see that Samson got here by making a series and a sequence of poor decisions, of bad decisions. He completely defied what God had outlined for his life, the calling that God had on his life, completely defied what people told him and warned him about, and he completely just did his own thing, made selfish decisions, and operated out of his own will. The choices you make you. So my hope and prayer for you guys tonight is to make wise choices and to live into God's good plan and purpose for your life, which is to look more and more like Jesus each and every single day. And here's the thing. I know it's hard to do. We all repeat the same mistakes. We all mess up. But here's one thing that Samson does not have at his disposal that you guys do. Samson operates autonomously in the story without community or without accountability. Now, the word autonomously means just by himself. No one else. Samson just always does what he wants to do. I don't care what you guys have to say. I don't care what you guys have to say. I don't care what you guys have to say. And it ends up in trouble, and he's in a bad spot. You guys are blessed because you have a church body. You guys have Sublime. You guys have North Metro Church. You guys have a place where you can come and you can have that accountability. You can have people speak into your lives. You can have people teach you wisdom and teach you scripture so that you can live by it and to show you the example of Jesus so that you may walk in it. And so you need to take full advantage of that and not be like Samson and just say, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to be selfish and demanding, and I'm going to lie, and I'm going to be violent and angry, and I'm just going to make the same dumb mistakes again and again and give in to pressure and do whatever I want. No, you guys need to hear this because this is what you guys are living every day. Listen to that counsel in your life. And don't be so short-sighted doing exactly what you want to do that you lose sight of the big picture. God's good plan and purpose for your life. So here's what we're going to do to end tonight. I want us, whether externally, internally, whatever, to have a posture of surrender. Because every single one of us in this room have something in our life that is just unfaithful to the Lord, that is destructive to those around us, and that is making us into someone we don't want to be. That is not conforming us into the image of Jesus. That's not making us more like Jesus. We all have something. We all have something that we need to invite God into and say, Lord, this has got to change in me. This is not good. And so, for you personally, I gave you some examples tonight. I don't know what that thing is for you. I can't speak to that. I don't know. But what I want you to do is I want you guys to just open yourselves up to what God has to say tonight. That means during the song, you just open up your hands, and you're like, man, I'm just going to let the Lord speak to me, and I'm going to listen. Or if you are at the front, you're like, no, I need to actually get down on my knees up front and just as a posture of surrender. Then do that. I've done that before. Because I think to truly honor God with this life that he has blessed us with, we have to surrender every single part of our lives to the leading of Jesus. In fact, I heard this pastor one time say, I didn't like it when I first heard it, but I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. He said, if Jesus isn't Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. If Jesus is not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. But then as I kind of sat with him, I'm like, okay, I get what he's saying. That Jesus wants us to surrender every single part of our lives. The psalmist prayed this. He said, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me, know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So during this last song, that's what I want you guys to just, I want you to have that same posture, that same intention. Lord, speak to me, search me. What is that thing that is making me, that choice I'm making, that is making me into something that's not for your glory? Ask the Holy Spirit to just rush in and change you from the inside out. And here's the thing. When you open yourself up like that, you are never, ever, 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 ever confronted with judgment, with condemnation. No. You are. If someone has told you that, I don't have time for that garbage. You are only confronted with grace and mercy and kindness and acceptance. And as you give that up to the Lord, as you say, Jesus, now you take that. I want to be more like you. The Holy Spirit that's continually changing you, that just like still small whisper that's just kind of leading and guiding you, that's speaking, that's moving, and that's changing you from the inside out. So we're going to end tonight, and we're just going to pray and open ourselves up to the leading of the Lord in our lives.